Well, good evening, everybody out there in internet land. Hi, how you doing, and howdy. My name is Brian Trippett. I am the Front Porch Conservative. Welcome back for another session of Chattin on the Porch, where we are on YouTube, Rumble, and Twitter. So if you have not done it yet, send out a message to your friends, send out a message to your enemies, send out a message to your frenemies, send them the link, tell them to get in here, and as they're coming through and as they're stepping up on the electronic front porch, tell them to hit that like button. Tell them to sub to the channel if they're not a sub already. We'd love to have their support, to quote the old Bartles and James commercial. Anyway, my name is Brian Trippett. This is Chattin' on the Porch. And tonight we're bringing back a guest who is a load of fun. And I figured, given all the news economically that's going on, especially this year when people are trying to figure out how they want to vote, it might be a good time to talk to somebody who knows what the heck is going on. So we're going to be on YouTube, we're going to be on Rumble, we're going to be on Twitter. So, pull up a chair, settle in, and let's have some fun. I'll start dropping the music and give you a little bit of an intro, and then we'll bring on our guest, who is most welcome here anytime they want to come on. Back in December, I received a recommendation. Well, actually, I received it earlier than December. And it was from one of my regulars who lives up north. Her social media handle is up in Connecticut, and she said, "You've got to get this lady on. You've got to bring her on here. She's a load of fun." And I've seen my guest on various shows, like Quite Frankly, other places around the internet, and such like that. And I was like, "Yep." Especially given how geographically close we are to each other. Like, yeah, we got to make this conversation happen. So December was a load of fun. It was just before Christmas. And tonight we are welcoming back nationally known professor of economics, Robin McCutcheon. Now, if you don't know anything about her, understand this. For over 20 years, she has lectured on a number of different subjects, including comparative economic systems, micro and macroeconomics, and money and the American banking system. But above all else, there's one thing that you can say about Dr. Robin. Never, ever make the mistake of asking her what she really thinks unless you are prepared to hear the answer, because bless your heart, she will tell you exactly what she's thinking. And if you're not prepared for that kind of honesty, I don't know what to tell you. But anyway, she is an absolute delight. We're glad to have her back. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome back to the electronic front porch a dear friend, and that is Dr. Robin McCutcheon. Doc, welcome back. How you doing?
I am well, thank you. And thank you so much for having me back on your show and sharing your audience with me.
Oh, absolute pleasure. I mean, I had an absolute blast when you came here in December. And, given some of what's going on in the news these days by way of stories about the economy and particular aspects and pieces of it, I figured, okay, it's time to get some reality checks here, because here's the headlines. Here's what I'm seeing in my life. And I'm sitting here going, these things don't seem to jive. I need somebody's perspective on this who studies this stuff on a regular basis. So I thought, okay, there's that going on. It's an election year, which means, as someone joked around with me last night, if you can't blind them with science, baffle them with bull, or I think there's something along those lines, is how the expression goes. And I thought, okay, we got to get through this fog of whatever it is people are putting out here. Let's get down to the real realities of what's going on. So I think you were telling me backstage your regular semester for the year is finished up. You're teaching a summer class or getting ready to. Oh! By the way, I forgot to ask you. When you and I last were talking, they were about to open on your college campus the new business school, and
That's
I've
right.
driven by the thing a million and one times. That is, I gotta tell you, from the outside looking in, that is one gorgeous looking building. I mean,
You
state
should
of
see
the
it
art,
from the
modern.
inside.
I'm gonna have to stop by sometime, because I mean, without totally giving myself away here or doxing myself, there's a little Italian place that's literally right across the street, and you probably know exactly where I'm talking about. And I'll stop in there, on the way home and have a bite of, spaghetti or, Alfredo or whatever I'm in the mood for. And then I'll walk to my car and I'll look at that new building. I'm like, ah, man, that thing's gorgeous. Absolutely beautiful.
Well,
But
I'll tell you what, Brian. Here's my offer. When we get back face to face in the fall, you
okay.
and I will have lunch together, and I'll walk you through the building. and you can see it from the inside.
Done.
Done.
I'm done. That's a
Somebody
deal.
make a mark on my calendar.
Well, have your people reach out to my people. We'll
That's
work
right.
something out, something
That's
like
right.
that. We've got a good
The,
little
the
crowd.
building, the
Go ahead.
building inside. Let me tell you. When I first saw the building from the outside, I thought, oh, oh, this isn't the fancy 18th or 19th century architecture that looked so pretty.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't really terribly thrilled with it. But then I went inside and went, oh my God, this is gorgeous. I never even see the outside of the building anymore. When I look at that building in my eye, I'm seeing the inside. It is absolutely beautiful.
Wow.
So yeah, so you got to come see it.
Cannot wait. Cannot wait to do it. So yeah, there's a lot going on in the world right now. Oh, aren't they? Isn't the university about to start on a cybersecurity building?
Yes.
About a block and a half up from that. I think they're supposed to break ground on that this summer, aren't they?
I'm not sure of the time frame for building, but I know that I think we just recently hired a director for cybersecurity.
Okay.
Um, our community, our university community among faculty is very, very close and small, and so it won't be a surprise to you to find out that I work with the spouse of the assistant director to the cybersecurity place.
I'm not
That
surprised.
that's yeah. And she was telling me all about it at our end of semester. Thank God we made it faculty party. And so yeah, everybody's really excited about this, and I can't wait to see how things turn out.
I've seen the architectural plans that have been laid out for that 2 block strip that we're referring to. And I tell you what, if well, it's Marshall, if look, I may as well just quit dancing around. It's Marshall University. If Marshall University does everything on that 2 block strip of Fourth Avenue that they're talking about, that they've got in the architectural designs, that is going to radically transform. And don't get me wrong, would I have every building in the town stay the same? Part of my sentimentality says, yeah, I would, because we're talking beautiful old architecture here, folks. If you've never been to the city that Marsh University is a part of, I highly recommend it to you, because there's just gorgeous old architecture. Would I have every building stay like that? Yes. Do I know that it can't? Of course. But I tell you what, if Marshall does everything they're talking about in those pictures and those layouts, man, that is going to radically transform that area and just make it a real cool, not just for even college students, for just the community in general. That's going to make that a
Yeah.
wonderful little hub, which,
Oh yeah.
Fourth Avenue has always been that to one degree or another, but that's going to be fantastic if they get it all in.
Yeah. That's going to expand the university's footprint, as nearly as I can tell, by almost 50%. If you're going
Yeah.
from 20th Street down to Hal Greer, it's another 2 blocks farther
Mm-hmm.
west, and that's really going to make a huge difference in the activities going on. I know right now the center of campus where the fountain is, that's where a lot of the at daily activities occur, because
Yeah.
it's a gathering point as
Sure.
such. But I think that what I saw in the plans for the new build is more of a conference center slash academic activity hub. So not so much fun and
Social.
games,
Yeah. Not so much
not so
social.
much social, but it's more academically inclined. And I think it's going to be interesting to watch it.
Yeah. Now, for those of you who are hearing this conversation, you're like, well, how can a university expand its footprint by 50% by just taking up 2 blocks? Interesting factoid about Dr. McCutcheon's employer. Marshall University is not one of the original land grant colleges or land grant universities, excuse me, the old land grant universities that was set up after the Civil War as one of the last things that President Lincoln pushed through before his assassination. Marshall College was started in the 1820s as a college for educating teachers. It wasn't
Mhm.
until the 1960s that Marshall achieved university status. But Marshall College and the city in which it resides are kind of like landlocked to each other. I mean, you got businesses and residences and everything else on all sides of Marshall. So when Marshall expands, it takes a little bit of time doing it because it's not like you've got 1,000 acres of land. It's like, oh, we're going to put this building over here. We're going to build that thing over there. What? No, you got to. It's a process. So
It's a process.
yeah, yeah. And when she says that Marshall could expand their footprint by 50% just by obtaining 2 blocks, you gotta understand all the geography that goes around the university. So I'm not surprised by that statement at all. But
Mm-hmm.
I want to say here is my friend who originally recommended you to be on back in December, and then she's just thrilled to death that you're back, and glad to see so many different people here on YouTube and Rumble already. So let's dive into some economic stuff. Like I said at the top, I can't figure out if I'm crazy or I'm being lied to. Here's what I'm getting at. Let me throw something up here. This is the Dow Jones at the end of today's, close of business. 38,000, up 322 points. If you move along, you read some of the headlines, like let's say CNBC, if after the close of the bell, you got stock futures rising. Apple, you reported their quarterly numbers, I guess. People are looking at April payoff data and all that happy stuff. But there's sorry about that. There's a serious
That's okay.
unease. My first boomer of the night. There's a serious unease among the American people, and I asked you about this, and I want to get your thoughts on it. Here's my government telling me everything's great, everything's rosy. I've got business folks like CNBC and Bloomberg and Fortune magazine and Forbes and everything's great, everything's wonderful. And over here, it's kind of like that moment from the movie Blazing Saddles when Gene Wilder's character holds up one hand and says, "Look at that," and the sheriff says, "Yeah, steady as a rock." And then Gene Wilder says, "Yeah, and I shoot with this hand." Well, this is the American people right now. They're like, the government's over here going, "Nope, nope, steady as a rock. Everything's good." The American people are like, which one of them's right? Let's just start it off generally.
Well, you asked the question.
Go for it.
So let me start with a little bit of history. On January the 20th, 2021,
Okay.
when Biden was installed like a toilet, I drove past the Sheetz gas or the Kroger gas station on Fifth Avenue.
Okay.
And so the one I'm talking about.
Oh,
The
yeah.
price of gas there was $1.87 a gallon.
Nice.
Okay.
Oy vey.
Last time I was at Kroger last week, it was $3.45 a gallon. Now, if you do a percent change equation on that, that's almost 100% increase in my price of gasoline. Now, 100% increase in the price of gasoline is going to ripple through the economy, affecting the price of anything that is delivered by truck or car to any store. And so as I watch the price of gasoline go from $1.87 past $2, past $2.50 into the $3 range, it kissed $4 not too long ago.
Yeah, very recent.
Yeah. So most people in West Virginia recognize that my accent is not from West Virginia. I'm not from West Virginia. I'm from Detroit, the auto capital of the world. Yep. And the people that I went to PhD school with, a lot of them were employees, analysts with the big three. And one in particular, I pulled him aside in April of 2008. Okay, so this is 16 years ago. And because I could see the price of crude oil was ramping up and the price of gasoline was going high as well. And I pulled him aside and I said, "Jonathan, I'm watching this price of gasoline go up. That's got to make the automakers really nervous. And he said, well, as it happens, and he worked for one of the big three. He said that my employer knows we have data that indicates to us that when the price of gasoline, retail price of gasoline, gets to $3.50, within 6 to 8 weeks, our economy tips into recession. We can prove this with data. So if you go look at the price of gasoline, average price of gasoline across the nation, from January 2021 to maybe the middle of July 2021, that price of gasoline was getting pretty high. It was up in the $2 range.
Yep.
But if you go back and you look to see when it tipped over $3.50 and then add 8 weeks to that, that's about the time we tipped into recession, which of course the White House and the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Bureau of Economic Advisors and the Federal Reserve, pick any of the branch banks, none of them talked about. Because why? Why would they want to tell you the truth that we really have been in recession since probably about the middle or maybe 3/4 way through 2021? Why would they want to tell you that?
Now let me play the devil's advocate for a minute.
Sure, go ahead.
They're going to come back and say we cannot have a recession because in order to have a recession, you have to have 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. And I can just hear, President Soft Serve right now saying, come on, man. Come on, man. We haven't had 2 consecutive negative quarters GDP growth. We're just fine. We don't have any recession. Your retort to President Soft Serve and Vice President Idaho would be what?
Bullshit.
See, folks, I told you, don't ever ask her what she really thinks unless you're prepared to hear the answer.
That bullshit, is such
bullshit. Bullshit. Why?
Because the numbers that the government is generating are false.
Why? Or how?
Why
Let me
would
rephrase that.
To...
How? How are they false?
This is so great. They just start massaging the data.
Okay.
And so for instance, we got a GDP number that came out for first quarter like a week ago.
Yeah,
and the GDP, I think it came out at 1.6%.
Yeah, here you go. From CNBC.
1.6%. Except that inside that number,
okay,
it's not 1.6% because GDP is really prices times quantity. The definition of GDP is the market value, P, price, of all final goods and services, Q, so price times quantity, produced within a country's borders during a certain period of time, generally a calendar year. So price times quantity, but in GDP, that price is not actually price, it's price level. Now, at the beginning of April, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the government came out with their consumer price index,
right?
CPI, and and it came in just a wee bit hot at like just under 3%. But remember that price of gas I was telling you about that's been up 100%?
Now, before you go further, for those who are watching this, remember, consumer price index basically is the gauge of inflation, that wretched thing that is eating everybody. Or, oh no, I'm sorry, we think it's eating us alive. The government's telling us that we don't have an inflation problem.
Right.
Please continue.
Okay, so inside of the consumer price index it's a basket of goods. It's like a loaf of bread, a gallon of milk, a dozen eggs, maybe large. And so there will be non-durable goods, there will be foodstuffs, there will be energy, there will be rents, there'll be shelter. It's basically a basket of goods that changes very little over the course of time.
Okay.
But the number that they produced is called core inflation. which means
Right.
they take that basket of goods and they throw out the food and the energy. And they've been doing this since the middle, like 1977, 78, the Carter years. Because in 1977 and 78, we had inflation running at what, 16 or 20%? And it was
About
so
that, yeah.
noticeable. It was so noticeable that the Carter administration had a cow, and they said, we've got to get these inflation numbers down. How do we do it? And some bright PhD at the Federal Reserve said, well, just take out the numbers that go up. So that way the number is just steady. And so they introduced that. They called it core inflation. So the number that they produced at the beginning of April, the not quite too hot at 2.7, not quite 3%. Yeah, everybody knew it was bullshit, which is why the Wall Street bankers threw Biden under the bus, and the Wall Street mainstream media ran the bus over top of him because they knew it was crap. And they know that people are beginning to notice it's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool them all the time. And when they're walking into Kroger's and they're spending 4 times their money on the same amount of products that they buy week in and week out, you can't fool them that way. So the GDP number, the price and the inflation times quantity, that P that represents inflation is manipulated.
Oh, absolutely.
And the Q that represents the all final goods and services, the quantity of all final goods and services, that Q is shrinking. So if you've got the inflation that is being held down and you've got Q is shrinking, then GDP has to be getting smaller. Hence the 1.6% that came out last week, because they can't hide it anymore, Brian. If you if you run over to shadowstats.com, it's John Williams's website. He's a really famous economist, analyst. And if you run over to shadowstats.com and you look at his basic analysis of GDP, you're going to see that it's probably in the negative numbers and has been for a while. If you listen to Martin Armstrong, his Socrates program has calculated GDP at -7%. Now, -7%.
Say that again. Say that again.
-7%, below the zero line.
Jeez.
700 basis points. So we're not at one. We haven't had, if you look at the numbers run properly, we haven't had a positive GDP number. It's not even that our percentage is slowing down. No, the percentage is going negative. It's fallen off the table. That's why your sense of, oh my God.
Yeah.
That's why your sense of I'm being gaslit is hypersensitive right now, because you can see with your own 2 eyes what's happening in the economy. Gas prices are up, diesel prices are up, anything that you buy in the grocery store is up. In fact, the only thing that I saw this week that was lower in price was a 75-inch TV screen at Walmart for $548, which is about half the price it was a year ago. And I looked at my husband and I said, that's like half the price. What's going on? And he kind of went, I don't know, tax refunds? Or nobody's buying them.
It's funny because you bring up something that I don't have the articles pulled up for it, but I forget who the economist was who came up with the expression, but I understand what they were getting at. The government intervenes in the economy. Government causes something to happen. People don't like what government has caused to happen. Government comes along with another solution that solves the problem that they caused, therefore, in the first place. Okay, let's go back to gasoline for a second. Biden does any number of different things immediately upon coming into office on January 20th, 2021. This causes the price of a barrel of crude to keep going up and up and up and up. Simultaneously, Biden is pushing electric vehicles. I mean, I forget if it's one of the first pieces of legislation, but huge subsidies for the big three automakers to pump out EVs. Well, there's been headlines over the past 2 or 3 months, and you've probably seen the ones I'm talking about. The dealerships are calling the manufacturers and saying, guys, I got rows and rows and rows of this stuff. Just come take them back. Nobody wants them.
Right.
Now we can sit here all the blessed night long and argue and debate, is an EV more efficient? Is it this? Is it that? Okay, that might be wonderful in the theoretical, but in the practical, if you can't get anybody to buy the product, it doesn't matter. I mean, there are plants up in Detroit, just as an example, and you know this, you're from there, that are laying people off by the thousands. Why? It doesn't matter if they're getting subsidized or not. No one's buying these things. They pumped millions and billions of dollars into the production lines to make them. Now the big three are stuck with all these things that are coming back from the dealerships, and everybody's like, okay, when are you lowering my gas prices? And the government's like, we're not going to lower your gas prices. You're going to buy an electric vehicle whether you like it or not. And I'm sitting here going, what insane jackass needs to be just smacked upside the head for this stupid policy?
I have quite a few people I could think of. But that problem reaction solution you're talking about, that's called the Hegelian dialectic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Government causes a problem, people react, and government comes along with their solution, which makes the problem even worse. I mean, yeah, that is a very typical way for government to herd the population in the direction that they want people to go. I just read maybe a week ago, Ford was losing something like $135,000 per electric vehicle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And,
I saw the same headline.
and I was delighted. I was delighted. It made me laugh my ass off when I was reading over the last several months where all of the car makers, except for Tesla, have stopped cold making electric vehicles.
Yeah.
They've got years worth of electric vehicles that are just going to turn into rust buckets on their lots because no one's going to buy them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
No one.
And no one's going to buy them. And, you mentioned that, people are actually seeing what's going on. I saw something. Oh, where was it the other day? It was actually McDonald's. And this is just an example of it. This is out of Europe. Let me throw something up on the screen here. This is in Europe. Now, it's not the US, but I mean, it's same thing here. To buy, average food at McDonald's in Europe, you're talking 11 euros, which is probably what? A Big Mac meal, I think I saw here in the US was costing like $15, depending on where in the country you're talking about. When
that
parents
looks like a pound sterling.
Okay,
symbol.
all right. I
But
could
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. A pound sterling is still more than $1.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like this is absolutely
one Big Mac.
One Big Mac. One.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's like you say, it doesn't matter if it's food, it doesn't matter if it's gasoline, and your point is valid. Any good that's transported into any retail store, doesn't matter if it's Walmart or some, mom and pop store that's been around, in the neighborhood for years, the cost of transportation is driving up the cost of each individual unit. And you've got a situation where inflation is outpacing wages and everybody's feeling the bite. Not like it's been felt in this country since the 1970s. And you can make a pretty good argument and, set me straight if I'm wrong, but you can make a real good argument. What's going on now is worse than what happened back in the 70s.
Well, I can make a better argument.
Go ahead.
So if you go over to shadowstats.com and you look at inflation numbers, John Williams has calculated the inflation that we're experiencing today using the 1980 calculation method, because that is the most accurate method. And with that method, our inflation rate is somewhere around 25%. Does that kind of ring a little closer to true?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And even that one is not the true inflation rate. I think if you were to take an honest look at all the prices, you would probably say our inflation rate is closer to 35 to 40%. Now, you tell me, would anybody in the Biden administration want that kind of information to go floating around the mainstream media? Of course not.
No, because they're now they're like the Dutch kid in front of the dam. They're trying to figure out which hole do I plug first.
They're having so many problems trying to carry Biden's water and cover for him and the disaster that his administration has wrought upon our economy and our people, that they don't know which lie to tell next, because none of the lies are working.
Yeah,
none of them. They're going to be forced. They're going to be forced by circumstance to begin telling the truth shortly. They have to, because their viewers are fleeing. So yeah. So your sense of, I feel like I'm being gaslit, is right on point. You are. I've talked about this for semester upon semester with my own students. They come and they say to me, I don't understand. I can see with my own eyes what's going on in the economy, and it's not good. But yet, all the information that I hear on the mainstream news is that the economy is great. That I'm imagining things. That things are so bad.
They're saying the same thing everybody else is, and if they're catching on to this in their late teens and 20s, that gives me some measure of hope, because it's like, yes.
Well, my students are not stupid. They can see with their eyes what's going on. They hear the kitchen table talk. Many of them still live with their parents or near enough to get home for Sunday dinner. They hear what's going on. They can see the budgeting that mom and dad are trying to make work for their limited resources. So it's not a surprise to me that things are going the way they are. I mean, I've just sat back for the last couple of years and went, I told you so.
I have a feeling that folks in your line of profession, if they come to it from the disciplines that you do, or maybe it's better to say the intellectual tradition of economics that you do, and we talked about this the last time you were here, folks like y'all are sitting there on the bench going, just looking at your watches, just waiting for it to happen, because it's like, okay, here comes everyone's recognition that everything's gone to shite in 3, 2, 1, bingo.
But
and
it's been a lot slower than I thought would happen, and all of a sudden I had this epiphany. I was lecturing one day I think it was in March, right after the March job numbers came out, and one of my colleagues, who's a macro teacher, had left on the podium the Bureau of Labor Statistic report, and it was some mainstream media. I don't remember if it was New York Times. It was one MSM, and it was like, how great the jobs report is. And I picked it up and looked at it, and I said, this is a pile of shit. And then, so I used it. I had my students go out on the internet and find out what really happened with that jobs report. And it turns out the Bureau of Labor Statistics has been lying about the number of jobs created for months, like almost 2 years. So we're going to get a jobs report tomorrow, because it's the first Friday of the month.
Oh, and that's right.
Really good. But you're going to have to dig down into it and peel that onion to go back and look and see that the Bureau of Labor Statistics will have reevaluated the April numbers and the March numbers and the February and January and December, November, October, all the way back for months. And it turns out that we haven't created any jobs. We've lost jobs. And I think the last report that I dug down into in April had something like there were no full-time jobs that Americans got since 2018. Yeah. And in fact, the full-time jobs that Americans had declined.
Yeah.
Now, part-time jobs have gone out through the roof, but how many of my students getting a college degree want to go work 2 or 3 part-time jobs?
Yeah.
Just to make ends meet.
Absolutely.
Nobody. No. So they're lying about the jobs numbers. I'm shocked. I'm totally surprised.
And folks, that's just the first half hour of tonight's live stream. My name is Brian Trippett. I'm the Front Porch Conservative. I am joined by one of the most honest and candid economists in all of America, Dr. Robin McCutcheon. And like I said, strap in, folks, because she's going to be dropping truth bombs all night and try the veal. Speaking of jobs numbers and gaslighting, I found this clip, and I love it when you and I get together, and I'm genuinely serious about this because usually one's thinking it, and the other one's got the other answer for it. So hang on, because Jared Bernstein, chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, please don't get
Jared.
sick on me. I know, bless his heart. But yeah,
really bless his heart.
Yeah. And now, folks, if you wonder how you're being gaslit, listen to what this guy's saying.
Let's talk about the job market, because that's really what matters to people. You don't need GDP. Your paycheck matters most. And there you've seen growth continue to defy expectations to the upside. Stronger job numbers than have been expected. And again, an unemployment rate that's been below 4% for over 2 years. That's generating real wage gains. On the GDP front, this president has a 25-year record when it comes to real GDP growth. And let's talk.
Oh, boy. Oy vey. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I before you say anything, I want to, if folks are out there thinking to themselves, well, really, is it really as bad as she's saying? May I respectfully point out, this is from Yahoo Finance.
Worse.
Yeah, Biden administration job growth numbers are subsidized by record number of government jobs.
Oh,
I don't know if you've seen
where the job growth is coming from.
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard the very same thing, that you were mentioning, and I've seen this in various places. The reason, in part, that the jobs numbers are so good, and this is, and for folks who are wondering about this is also similar to what happened between 2009 and 2017. Barack Obama had almost the same phenomenon on his hands. Hey, I got 300,000 jobs here. I got 275 there. But if you look at the numbers, and Dr. McCutcheon, back me up on this or tell me if I'm wrong, yeah, they're jobs, but they're mostly part-time jobs.
Oh,
and
yeah.
if you're trying to, and keep in mind, Obama had an advantage, unlike Biden at this point. Obama could get away with, part-time jobs being the jobs growth number because you had practically zero inflation, or let's just say it was the historic average of inflation, like what the Fed's target is of about, call it 2%. He had that and low gas prices, because I will give Obama credit for this. Trump got a lot of credit for energy policy and making America energy independent, and some of that started with Obama. Now, a lot of it, but he sort of kicked it into gear with like, okay, we're going to change this policy, this policy, this policy. So he had two things that offset the fact that the jobs numbers were big, but they weren't quality. In that, yeah, you've got a 275, 300,000, person job report per month, but when most of them are part-time, couple that with rising fuel prices and rising inflation, the jobs numbers don't do any good, or at least that's my opinion. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong on this.
Well, you're not wrong, but let me go back to Obama and the numbers that he was seeing. He had low inflation because we were in a depression. That GDP number, that P part, was shrinking because we had demand destruction. meaning people didn't have the money to buy things. So our demand curve, if you can think of the demand curve, which, it's a curve that goes from lower left to upper right.
Yeah.
That demand curve had shifted back to the left, meaning our demand was falling. We were in a depression from 2009 until about 2011. But again, that's not what the government numbers told us. Those were my calculations.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a depression and it's a non-inflationary depression, meaning that the prices are coming down, of course you're going to see low gas prices. People weren't out moving around. The jobs numbers were horrendous because you remember what was passed in the spring of 2010? Obamacare.
Yeah.
And Obamacare had part of the rules of Obamacare said that if you are a company that had 50 or more employees, you had to offer full health care for everybody. So, and that was going to kick into place January of 2013. So what did employers start doing? They started trimming back. And part of Obamacare also said, well, if you're working more than 30 hours a week, you have to have the employer had to pay full health care. So employers were taking that normal 40-hour a week and they trimmed it back to 29 hours. Don't you remember when Nancy Pelosi came out and said, well, this is fine. Go get another part-time job. Then you'll have two.
Well, but that sort of begs the question. So here I am, the average American worker, and my government's looking at me saying, well, just go get yourself a second job. My response to that is, why should I have to? You're forcing me to do it by the insane things you're doing,
Right.
interfering in the natural flow of the economy.
Right. That's exactly what people were saying in my area too. Some of them were flashing hand signals at the same time.
Michigan fingers of friendship, no doubt. Yes.
Well, or a West Virginia hand signal describing displeasure with one's government.
And they were not telling them that the government was number one, in case you're wondering what that looked like.
No. But my point is that this manipulation of the numbers is not just in the Biden administration. Trump did it too.
Yeah.
And Obama and baby Bush and Clinton and Papa Bush and Reagan and Carter and Ford. And you want me to go back any further?
Oh,
How about we go Ford, Nixon, Eisenhower, Truman, FDR, Hoover, Coolidge. I'm missing one. I want to go all the way back to Wilson, but there was
Harding.
Somebody in there. Harding. That was it. All of them manipulated the numbers. That we've been lied to for decades, 110 years, if you want to look at the Federal Reserve.
Oh, yeah.
So this gaslighting is not new. It's just so massive and in your face that you're being smothered with it.
Yeah.
And that's when people start to wake up and go, what the is going on around here? I almost let one out. Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, there's a fairly crass expression that I use on occasion to describe what I feel like my government's doing to me.
Yeah, we're being screwed.
Well, that's one crass way of putting it. My crass way of putting it is, don't piss down my back and then try to convince me it's raining.
That's right. Well,
and that's what the government's doing to me. Yeah,
they're pissing like mad, and people are beginning to not believe them. So let me throw some more bad news at you.
Oh, please.
All right. So, not surprisingly, the Federal Open Market Committee, the FOMC, part of the Federal Reserve System, it's their little committee who decides what the Federal Reserve rate, federal funds rate will be. Unsurprisingly, they left those rates unchanged. Now, the federal funds rate is the rate that the Fed tells banks they have to charge each other to borrow money. The discount rate is the interest rate that the Fed charges banks if they come to the Fed as the lender of last resort to borrow money. So they left that federal funds rate steady. Now, think of it this way. If banks have to charge each other money to borrow money, they have to charge each other an interest rate to borrow money, then those banks are going to charge a higher interest rate if they're loaning out money to like you or me or businesses.
Mm-hmm.
If you go and you pop over to CNBC and take a look at the 10-year Treasury rate, this morning I looked at it, it was 4.6%, which means it's 0.4% less than 5%. In other words, it's right at almost at that 5% level. That 5% level is like a break-even point. That 10-year Treasury is that 10-year Treasury rate, 4.59, so almost 4.6. That 10-year Treasury rate knocks on and impacts mortgage rates.
Yep.
The higher the 10-year Treasury goes, the higher the mortgage rates go. And the mortgage rates are almost at 8%. And what did Jamie Dimon tell us just, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago was like, oh my God, we can't have a 30-year mortgage rate at 8%. My Lord have mercy, what will happen? Well, we're teetering on the edge of not recession, we're teetering on the edge of depression. Yeah. And Jamie Dimon knows that if that 10-year Treasury hits 5%, all bets are off. All hell will break loose.
Well, apparently,
so I've been saying for months that the Federal Reserve can't raise the interest rate because it'll push that 10-year Treasury up over 5%, and the knock-on effects will be calamity in the market, a bigger calamity. Nobody will be able to cover it up. The Federal Reserve can't lower the interest rate because what that does is it frees up the banks to loan more money, which means that inflation will go up. So they can't do that because, Lord have mercy, that core inflation would get to 3%, you know. And so I've been saying for months that the Federal Reserve's only move is to not move at all. And lo and behold, they didn't.
Yeah, and in case folks didn't catch it, you know, let me throw this up here. They've left the rate. Yeah, they've left the rates unchanged. And there was some rumor afoot, or let me rephrase that. There are those who work in American politics who were speculating that the Federal Reserve, in their own way, either deliberately or unconsciously, we're going to help out the current administration by lowering interest rates. Well, that theory, I think, is more or less out the window because after what the Fed did the other day, you're right, they've got nowhere to go. And
they're stuck. They are stuck. They are well and truly between a rock and a hard place. But the story doesn't end there. Because according to the information that I've kind of looked into, this year, 2024, whatever's left of it, we have $8 trillion in long-term bonds that have to be refinanced. $8 trillion. We have $2 trillion in short-term bonds that have to be refinanced. And we've got a $2 trillion current deficit that the government has to sell bonds in order to finance. So we've got $12 trillion that we have to fund or refinance this year. Who's going to buy our debt? Not Japan. Japan's unloading our debt. China's unloading our debt. Russia's unloading our debt. Is there a country in this world that is buying our debt? I don't think so.
Funny you should bring that up because I pulled up a headline ahead of you coming on here, and interestingly, CNBC was starting to be my go-to for tonight. Treasury, and this was back from late last year, Treasury details plans to step up size of bond sales to manage growing debt load and higher interest rates. Well, let me ask you a question from the perspective of Joe Lunchpail. Okay, got a guy. He might be a factory worker, might not, just the average, 40 hour a week guy. Gets up every day, kisses his wife goodbye, pats the kids on the head, pets the dog, walks out the door, goes to his job. He works his job. He comes home, drinks a beer on Friday night or in the evening, whatever. Well, he turns on the evening news and he sees, things, like this headline, for example. Why economists are so worried about soaring debt levels. And he hears reports that the national debt is now at $34 trillion, and we're about every 100 days, we're adding another trillion to it. Now, from Joe Lunchpail's perspective, he's just a guy working in a factory. He's trying to, keep the roof over the head and keep clothes on the back and food on the table for the kids and the wife and everything else. And doggy biscuits. Don't forget the doggy biscuits. If he's sitting here going, should I be worried about all this national debt? Let me ask it from Joe Lunchpail's perspective. How worried should the American people be about how high the level of national debt is getting? I mean, are we at a dog and cat moment here? I mean, seriously,
We're raining cats.
Are we raining cats down? I mean, what's going on here?
She has to put in an appearance every time I'm on somebody's podcast. She gets up and walks around.
That's fine. That's perfectly fine. I mean,
Joe Lunchpail, if he's got religion, would be a good idea to pray, because that's the only thing that's going to save us.
Well,
because let me
okay.
put it in some context.
Okay.
We've got in the world, we've got a group of nations called the BRICS: the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And I've been calling it a consortium because there's more than just the 5 countries. There are actually 10 that came together in August last year. And my research shows me that there's about 40 other countries that are applying to become part of this group. Now, this group of countries is not going to use the US dollar for buying and trading between them. They are going to use either gold or silver or their own country's currency, or like Zimbabwe that just backed their own currency with gold. They call it the ZIG. So you've got 50 countries, 50 of the biggest countries in the world that are not going to buy this $12 trillion in debt. They're not going to buy it. And if they have any of our debt sitting on their books, they're going to start selling it. They're going to dump it. Now, the more countries don't buy our debt or dump our debt, that sends more of those little paper dollars flowing through the community, and inflation is going to go much higher than it is now. Like Weimar Republic high.
Wheelbarrow buys a loaf of bread. Wheelbarrow buys a loaf of bread.
You're going to need a wheelbarrow of those paper dollars to buy you a loaf of bread. Jeez. That's what's coming at us. That's the tsunami that's headed our way. So, Mr. Bucket, he either needs to stack some silver or gold or lead and maybe send some prayers that there's a way out of this. But it's not going to be through the Fed, because it's the Fed's fault. They done this to us. If I can use some local colloquium, they done this to us to screw us. This is the way that this is the way that a communist organization overthrows a nation. You inflate the currency, you counterfeit the currency, you make it worthless, and then you offer the people a solution. Does that sound familiar?
It does. Well, no, but hang on. But let me, and not that I'm normally in the habit of defending the Fed, but let me play the devil's advocate again. So, about 3 months after Biden is installed in office, and I love your analogy, much like a toilet, inflation starts to creep a little more, creep some more after that. Well, what's the traditional role of the Fed? They're supposed to be the watcher on the wall when it comes to doing something about inflation. And how do they do that? They raise interest rates. So, and again, I'm not trying to defend the Fed here. I'm just trying to make sure I understand this in full context. You say they done did this to us. Well, okay, they're gonna come back and say, well, we done did what we supposed to do. We kept inflation down. But you're saying now,
remember those inflation numbers are fake.
Okay.
Did they keep inflation down? No. Now, if you wanted to get rid of the Federal Reserve, how would you do it? Would you just let them run their little scheme Would you let them inflate the dollar into worthlessness so that people actually wake up and go, oh my God, we've got to get rid of this. We can't have a centralized currency, because the Federal Reserve is the monopoly owner of the Federal Reserve note. There's nothing behind that note. Nixon took us off the gold standard in 71. Then we were on the petrol oil standard since, like 1974, 73.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Joe Biden, when he ran us out of Afghanistan, effectively took us off the petrodollar. So there's nothing but hot air behind our dollar. So if you wanted to get rid of the Federal Reserve System and return the United States to a decentralized money system, you've got to let them kill themselves.
Okay.
You got to let the Fed strangle itself, and that's exactly what it's doing. That's exactly what it's doing.
Okay. Now,
and of course, Congress is helping by spending money like they're drunken sailors.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, folks who are watching this stream, and if you just happen to stop in and listening to these two wonderfully brilliant individuals talking to each other, one of them is Dr. Robin McCutcheon, this lovely lady over here, professor of economics. Me, I'm a basic, internet provocateur, the Front Porch Conservative, otherwise known as Brian Trippett. We're on YouTube, Rumble, and Twitter, and we're sitting here, one of us is Jeremiah and the other one is Isaiah, and both of us are preaching the doom of the nation. But that said,
there were good outcomes to those eventually.
And that's what I'm getting to next. Okay. So we've got a situation where inflation is just absolutely rampantly out of control. We have a Federal Reserve that is just absolutely turning the dollar into toilet paper. We've got drunken sailors in the Congress that, are spending our money as though they're on shore leave for the first time in 3 years. What is the solution to this? Is there a solution to this? Are there a series of solutions? I mean, it's not like someone's going to do a Thanos snap and just, make everything good as gold. We're going to go through some pain here beyond where we are right now. I get that. But there's got to be some kind of way, not necessarily to stop the pain from happening altogether, because that's not going to be possible.
No.
It's not going to happen. But how do we turn this around so that, Joe Lunchpail, his paycheck he gets every 2 weeks actually counts for something. He can buy groceries without feeling like he's going to cry when he goes to the gas pump, or his wife and kids are like, I'd like to get this new dress or some new clothes for the kids. I can't afford it. I mean, how do we, the American people, make this thing better than where it is right now? Because we got to be able to go up from here.
Yeah. Well, we still have a long way to fall, or a short way to fall across a lot of long rocky ground. Any changes that are going to be made to our money system have to come from a hue and cry from the American people. So how much worse does it need to get for Joe Lunchbucket's wife to not be able to afford a pair of underwear because inflation is hyperbolic?
Mm-hmm.
Right? When Joe sets his lunch bucket down and goes with all of his friends over to not the pub, but the nearest city hall to complain. I mean, the kind I've got in my head, I've got two scenarios. One of them is pitchforks and torches,
mm-hmm.
And one of them is a peaceful revolution at the ballot box. So, we've got a trial run of the Summer of Love 2.0 with all of these riots on campi around the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I don't see a lot of that going anywhere. It's not like the George Floyd riots, where the race card was being thrown hither and yon.
Right. Yeah.
No, people aren't getting upset about this. In fact, most of us are going, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. I don't really like it. Y'all need to spank your kids because they obviously didn't get raised right the first time. So So there are two paths out of this. And first we have farther to fall, because Americans have to wake up to the absolute dire situation that having a centralized money system has put us into. And granted, it took us 111 years to get here, but here we are. We're going to see inflation hyperbolic. That's going to wake up the Joe lunch buckets and their wives and their kids and the teachers. And there will be a hue and cry that goes up across the nation about what's happening with our US dollar. But see, that's not the only crisis that's happening, Brian. What else is going on? These riots have exposed something else, because while everybody was rioting on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, what did Congress do yesterday? They passed an anti-First Amendment, anti-Semitism bill, so that you and I, neither of us, can criticize Israel. So there's your problem or action solution. Problem. We got, I don't know. I can't even describe what groups were on our campi. Free Palestine, Free Israel, anti-Palestine, anti-Israel. I'm confused.
Yeah.
I mean, at one point on Columbia's campus, both sides rose a hue and cry of FJB. They were united on one thing.
Yeah.
It's his fault. Right? So you've got the campus color revolutions that aren't really going to go anywhere, that are just trial balloons. I mean, I'm expecting pallets of bricks to start showing up at the end of May as we go into the summer season. But we're not going to have people throwing the race card around. And the cops have shown that they are very amenable to arresting people. Can you imagine? Arresting people, throwing bricks. Wow, what a concept.
Yeah, New York City cops, who I remember some of the images that came out in 2020. And I mean, literally, I can, to this day, I can still see it in my mind's eye. There was a little 30-second clip of a video up in New York City. This police officer, someone managed to grab his baton and crack him over the head.
Yeah.
All he was trying to do is break up a couple of people. And I'm sitting here going, yeah. And the retirement numbers coming out of the NYPD are, I can't believe all these officers are retiring at 20 years or less.
Shocked and surprised. Everybody's retiring.
Yeah.
And then they lose their qualified immunity, so they can't knock heads or fight back.
Yeah.
So color me shocked when half of Portland's police department gets up and says adios.
Yeah. And I mean, go ahead.
So we've got that going on. The southern border is wide open, right? The latest numbers that I saw were somewhere in the millions this year. Yeah. So the Democrat Party is trying to import new voters, because the Black vote and the Hispanic vote are going, we're getting off the plantation. We're headed over that way towards Trump. So, so is it any shock and surprise that while our economy is absolutely being destroyed on purpose, and our money is being made worthless on purpose, that we've got all of these other distractions? Look here, look there, look somewhere else. Now I read that all of these rioters, or the riots on the various campi, that there are quite a few paid provocateurs. And some very clever somebodies have been following the money to find out who's been paying them. Well, unless these people are being paid in cash, don't you think somebody could track this money?
Well, shouldn't be that hard.
Our banking system is wonderfully integrated computer system. Of course, I bet you anything, someone is tracking the money from the very first person who turned it loose all the way, and I know I've got some names, all the way down to the paid provocateurs. But if you wanted to see who the paid provocateurs were, because they're down in the minutia of the salt of the earth, and they only sprung their heads up if you wanted to find out wouldn't you say, hey, come on over, just need you to riot a little bit, I'll just transfer you some money?
It's funny because I have my various criticisms of New York City Mayor Eric Adams, and he did something the other day, and I understand why he did it. He more or less, in one sense, had no choice. Columbia and I guess Central University of New York reach out to the mayor by letter and go, guys, we've lost control of this thing. We've got to have help. Quite appropriately, he sends in the police department and they bring Columbia back under control. Hamilton Hall is depopulated of occupying students, which, by the way, I don't know if you saw this. There's a clip going around. It's like 13 seconds, and this cracked me up. These students are standing in front of some doors, and they realize they've been barricaded in. And one of them says, "Oh my God, they can't do this to us. It's finals week. Can I go home?" And I'm sitting here going, your student demonstrating ancestors right now are spinning in their graves. They took over places like Berkeley back in the 60s, and you're sitting here whining about you want to go home because it's finals week. Grow up, you wussy. I mean, seriously. But
Oh,
but but he,
oh,
but Adams gave a news conference the night that whole deal went down, and he said, "Yeah, it's our intelligence people inside the NYPD. Yeah, we know for a fact that there are individuals who are agitating these riots, and they are not students." He said these are paid agitators. Now,
right.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a representative from New York, oh, I can't believe he said that. This is wrong. Blah, blah, blah. Hey, honey, I hate to tell you this, but this guy's a former New York City cop. He knows what he's talking about. You may not agree with what he does as mayor, but he knows of what he speaks.
AOC is another one who is poorly raised, I guess is the way I want to say it.
She needs to go back to Boston University and ask for a refund on all that money she paid for that education, because they ripped her off. Well, absolutely ripped her off.
Ivy League. They're all communist institutions, but these riots on campus are now shining the eye of Mordor on what kind of education students are getting in the Ivy Leagues.
Yeah.
And if these colleges and universities are getting taxpayer dollars, guess who's going to be really upset?
Yeah.
The taxpayers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think some of this, I have two paths on this. One is we're shining the eye of Mordor on these communist institutions, which most universities are, most of them, except maybe Hillsdale and maybe Liberty First. But even Marshall has its fair share of communists who are professors. And even though we've got academic freedom, and they can teach anything that they want, I can see down the road 10 or 20 years, or maybe not even that long, where students will say to the professors, "Stop gaslighting me. I know what you're telling me is a lie." And they'll avoid those classes. And you avoid those classes long enough, and those degree programs will die. And those degree programs die, and then the colleges will die. We might actually get back to a classical philosophy degree where they're actually studying Socrates and Aristotle instead of Marx and Trotsky.
Oh, absolutely.
So there are a number of peels on this onion to come off, and one of them is shining a light on the university system and how communist it well and truly is a communist system. And the only reason I made it through is because, yea, though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I'm the meanest bitch in the valley. And I know how to make policy work for me. And I wasn't going to back down. But but there's another thing. This is going to shine the light on all these universities that are being taxpayer funded. And taxpayers are going to say, no, I don't want my money to go that way. And they will elect to their state houses delegates or legislators who will follow what the taxpayers say, and they'll defund those colleges.
Yeah.
Can you see Harvard's board of governors being told, we're not giving you any more money. You got $5 billion in your foundation, go use it.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah, and be perfectly justified in telling them that. I mean, there's some other economic questions I want to get to that also.
But what I'm saying is,
go ahead.
I wanted to show you a rolled up ball of string. It's so complicated. There are so many twists to this ball of yarn of stories and narratives that the MSM wants us to believe that aren't true, and the real things that are happening that are true, that if you are clever and you are perceptive, you will begin to be able to peel this onion apart and get down to what some of the real things that are going on. I mean, like I said, I think a lot of this is just distraction, to keep your eyeballs off the ball. When Congress passed that bill, the anti-Semitism bill yesterday, do you realize what's going to happen? It's going to shine the eye of Mordor on all of those Congress critters that are bought and paid for by Israel, that have actual dual Israeli citizenship.
Yeah.
Dual Israeli citizenship.
Oh, absolutely.
In our federal Congress, and maybe at the state level. I've been saying for years, these Congress people should be wearing a jacket like one of the Formula One drivers wears, where he's got all the patches of all of it. Guess where all of their money comes from? It's going to shine the light on that too. And do you think people aren't going to wake up with that? Every little thing that's happening out there is another poke at Joe Lunchbucket to wake up and see what's happening.
I want to take it back to New York City and New York State for a second. Then I want to get into another broader economic question. Look, regardless of whether someone likes Donald Trump, dislikes Donald Trump, that's fine. But there's something, and it's like you said, there is an awakening that's happening. And in New York City, you're watching a former president of the United States. And again, you can not like him, you can like him, fine. You got a former president of the United States being held on trial. And again, I'm not even going to get into the specifics of that. That's not my point.
Yeah.
But you watch two different verdicts come down trying to strip him of basically $500 million of his assets that he's worked all of his life to obtain.
Mm-hmm.
You see a judge putting a gag order on him, and if he violates the gag order, then the judge is the judge is not kidding about this. This was reported, threatening him with jail in violation of his right to First Amendment. And again, you can agree with what he says, not agree with it, fine. But the point is this, and I keep asking this question of my audience, on live streams and in videos, when does it reach the point that not only Joe Lunchpail in New York City or New York State, but the leadership of the state says, okay, we got to rein this crap in because this is just getting out of control. I mean, when you got a guy like Kevin O'Leary, who is by no means any kind of a Trump fan, major business wheeler and dealer, you see him on Shark Tank, you see him on other places, he's saying, this is madness. And again, he's no Trump fan, but he's sitting here saying, this is crazy. This has got to stop. And I think, and it may take some time, and this is just my, and again, I'm not trying to be Pollyanna about it because I'm like you, we're going to go through a lot more pain before it gets better. But I think we're at the inflection point where the American people are looking at everything going on. And they're like, this is a load of horse shit. We can do better than this. And whichever one of you nitwits is doing this to us, it's time for you to go. Just go. And speaking of nitwittery, I got to ask you about this because.
Wait.
Go ahead.
I get to comment on this.
Oh, I guess. Don't let me stop you.
First of all, I think that Trump's trials over in New York State are his campaign.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I'll absolutely agree with that.
That's his campaign. And what is he doing? He's showing the American people how unjust our justice system really is.
And that's one of the reforms going to come out of this.
There's a level of justice for the in crowd, and then there's some other form of justice for the out crowd. And President Trump is making this quite clear. It's and Joe Lunchbucket, whether he's in New York City or over in Hurricane, can see it very plainly. And they will be making up their own minds how things will go. But yeah, Trump is using this trial as his campaign. I can't wait for him to do a rally at Madison Square Gardens or over in the Bronx or up in Harlem.
He'll pack the place out.
He will pack it out.
And it will terrify Democrats in New York State.
Yeah, and so all of the leadership up in Albany, New York, where their capital is, they've got to be terrified right now.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
They've got to be terrified. And when Trump wins these trials and shows how unjust the justice system is, I think there will be a strong reckoning coming down the pike.
I'll agree with that. I will
Pitchforks and torches. Maybe not. Maybe a peaceful revolution at the ballot box.
That's my prayer because it's like
that's mine.
Yeah, because I really do, and I'm not just like I said. I have my opinions about who I want to see elected to various offices, but I'm also looking at it. I think you're doing the same thing, albeit we're coming at it from two different sides. You're coming from the economic side. I'm coming at it from more the political side, but we're both seeing the same thing. The 2024 election, you always hear it all the time. This is the most important election of our lifetime. Shut up. This one, however,
it is.
We're out of mulligans.
We are. This is it.
Yeah.
If Americans do not turn out to support the country that they love in November, we're all fucked.
Yeah. That's the technical term for it, folks. I think that's what they use at economic conferences. We're all fucked.
No, just me.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Say whatever you want. I don't care.
Most professors are very collegial. In fact, because I swear like a drunken sailor, most of them don't want anything to do with me. So I'm just plain spoken, which is why I love West Virginia.
Oh, that is, yeah. For folks who are watching this, or maybe they're going to watch it later, and you're like, I've never been to West Virginia. What's it really like? Oh, come down for a visit. You're in for a treat.
It's great.
Let me shift it back. Speaking of Congress, there's something that happened, and this is going to get into your wheelhouse because I know that you've studied, foreign investment in banks, et cetera, by other nations, et cetera, as part of your study of economics. Okay, regardless of where somebody's at on the whole question of Ukraine, what should we do about it? What should we not do about it? Congress slipped something into the Ukraine funding bill, and I went pale because I'm like, oh, you idiots did not just do this. Now, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, and I don't have it pulled up here, although it wouldn't take me long to get my hands on it. They slipped in something that allows the executive branch to seize the assets of the nation of Russia that are currently being held in banks here in the U.S. and not just seize them, but also turn around and, in this case, disperse them to Ukraine if the executive branch so chooses. Well, they used to say California is the trendsetter for America. Well, America is the trendsetter for the world, in that what the Biden administration is hoping, and this has been reported in various places, is that other nations around Europe, England, France, Germany, etc., that are all in favor of what's going on in Ukraine, will do similar to the point that hundreds of billions of dollars will be transferred from Russia's holdings to Ukraine. Now, here's the question that I'm getting at to you. I know my opinion of this idea, but from an economic standpoint, what kind of effect does it have on a nation's banks when the government can come in and seize the assets of another nation that are being held in our financial institutions and then turn around and do whatever we want with it?
Yeah, I think that's terrifying for any other country. The very first time that the potato, that's who I call Biden, that the potato orders Russian assets to be seized and sent to Ukraine or anywhere, countries around the world will be extracting whatever assets they have from it won't take them but a second to get them out because it's all electronic. It's not like they got piles of money hidden in a vault. It's all electronic. They will take their money so fast it'll make your head spin. But do you remember what Russia did? Russia turned around and seized $400 million
and in Chase Bank, if I remember correctly,
from JP Morgan Chase, and said, well, if you want to do it, what's to stop us from doing it? And that was the tit for tat, right? That was the warning shot. You want to do this? That's fine. But there are consequences to your actions. And the rest of the world, all the other countries, you could just see them having a cow. Oh crap. Our actions have consequences. Look what the United States just threatened to do. And look what Russia did.
Yep.
But you have to realize, people have to realize that Ukraine is just a gigantic money laundering operation anyway. Do you remember Sam Bankman-Fried with FTX?
I remember.
Do you remember FTX got let's see what happened. The United States sent billions of dollars to the Ukraine Central Bank. The Ukraine Central Bank sent that money to FTX, which was the crypto. I don't want to call it a crypto coin, but it was a cryptocurrency kind of thing that Sam Bankman-Fried ran. And Sam Bankman-Fried sent it right back over to the Democrat committee.
Yep.
Now, what is that called? Money laundering.
Money laundering.
The whole Ukraine operation, as far as I'm concerned, is just one big money laundering operation, while Russia tiptoes through the country. Because honestly, don't you think they could have bombed the holy hell out of them?
Yeah.
They've been tiptoeing through the country. Why? They've been going around to all of the bioweapons labs that the United States has been paying for, which Victoria Nuland told us about, a year or 2 or 3 ago in Congress to Marco Rubio?
I remember.
Russia's been going around to all of those bioweapons labs, collecting all of the information. What kind of information you think they're going to come out with at the UN or the Security Council? What kind of crap has the United States government been doing, or various agencies in the United States government? And let me think, wasn't there a perfect phone call that Donald Trump had in the August of 2019 with President Zelensky?
Yeah.
And Trump wanted Zelensky to kind of figure out what was going on with. That was the first impeachment.
Yeah.
He got impeached over a perfect phone call. In fact, I had the transcript for that perfect phone call that I gave to my senior class, and I said, I want you to find me the quid pro quo in here.
Yeah. And here's the quote from Victoria Nuland.
Gypsy.
Yep.
There may be. There were 36 of them that we know of.
Yep.
That we know of publicly.
Yep.
Yeah. So, this Ukraine is another distraction, because when did Ukraine pop up? We didn't give a crap about Ukraine until the end of February 2022. And what was happening in the economy February of 2022?
Inflation, as I recall, was just hitting its stride.
Just getting up there. That's when gas prices really were cranking seriously. Yeah. And the week after Russia started tiptoeing into Ukraine, President Putin turned around and told all the Russian people, go out and buy as much gold and silver as you can. I've taken all the taxes off.
Yeah.
And then he backed the he backed the Russian ruble with gold. 5,000 rubles bought you a gram of gold, and there's about 29 or 30 grams in an ounce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we get the whole BRICS thing. You know, BRICS has been going on for a while. BRICS has been an idea between Russia and China since, as far as I can tell, early 2000s.
Yep.
Well, what was going on in the early 2000s? Right?
Yeah.
So Russia and China have been planning this escape from using the US dollar, because any country that refused to use the US dollar all of a sudden had the US military show up on their front door. The US military has been the policeman of the world. No, we've been the bully of the world, going from country to country to country to force them to use the US dollar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you got Russia and you got China. They put their heads together and like, we got to get the fuck out of here. So let's just do it. And then what did Joe Biden do the first week of March 2022? March 7th, I think. He told Russia, you're off the SWIFT system. And Russia probably went, thank you. We've got our own system.
Yeah, the part that amazes me about American policymakers, be they in the foreign policy realm or just politicians in general, is how much they underestimate the intelligence of Vladimir Putin.
I know.
And I say this with a caveat, because I've got listeners to my channel who hate Putin's guts. You know, me, I'm like, okay, I think you can be a ruthless SOB, but you know, I respect you for your brains and for the leadership of your country for 20 years. Putin's been getting ready for this day ever since the late 1990s.
Yeah.
You know, trying to build a manufacturing base up in Russia, you know, making sure they've got gold reserves, making sure they're on a not necessarily textile based, but a
manufacturing
base of their economy. And, you know, when the day came around that the U.S. says, well, we'll just put sanctions on you, to which Putin's like, and your point?
He gave him a Russian hand signal.
Yeah, we'll slap restrictions on the ruble. And your point? I mean, you know,
So?
I'm not. I mean, there were some economic effects to what U.S. policy did toward the ruble, toward the Russian economy, which lasted basically all of about 4 or 5 months, and then the Russian ruble was back to normal. You know,
the policymakers, and you were observing this. You've been observing this for at least the last several times that I've been watching your podcast. You're like, what the hell are these people doing in Washington? It's like they've lost their minds. They're doing every single action that they could take to destroy the economy, destroy our country, destroy our friendships with countries around the world. They haven't missed a beat in taking actions to cripple everything, to destroy not just our economy, but the world's economy. So what's really going on there, Brian? What's the assumption behind? I mean, what was your original assumption? You said you've been a political horse race watcher for decades.
Yeah.
What was your original assumption that you've been operating under for all of these decades watching politics?
My original assumption was, okay, Democrats and progressives and liberals, you know, might, you know, disagree with me about how the country ought to be run, but at heart, you know, they've got the best interests of the country in mind. I can't say that anymore. I can't.
Did they ever?
They hit it a whole lot better than they did now.
Because I'll tell you, the 1960 Democrat National Platform was communist.
Yeah.
That's when they put it out there. 64 years ago. Yeah. They've been communists. And I think what's going to be happening in Congress this coming up week, didn't Marjorie Taylor Greene, didn't she let everybody know she was going to She was going to call a vote to get rid of Johnson.
Motion to vacate. Yeah.
Motion to vacate. Well, let's think about this. If the Democrats come in to save Johnson, what does that tell us?
Yeah.
He's part of the uniparty. If the
Yeah.
rhinos vote to get rid of Johnson and vote in Hakeem Jeffries, I mean, I think there's the eye of Mordor is everywhere. And one thing that's going to happen with this is it's going to expose to the American people that there's not Democrats or Republicans. There's a uniparty.
Yeah.
There's one party. It's the Communist Party. And they're the ones trying to destroy our country, which is why your assumption of, I think most Democrats and libertarians and, people in politics, I think they're there for the right reason, to do the right thing for the country. But what if you're wrong? What if they're not there to do the right thing for the country? What if they're there to, in particular, destroy the country?
Yeah.
Because those are all the actions that we're seeing our Congress critters take. They have not missed a beat in 4 years, 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Every single action that they could take that would destroy the economy or destroy our country, and have that ripple out into the world and destroy other countries' economies and peoples, they have taken. I'm just going to say it. They're the enemy of what is all good and true about America. They are our enemy, and they've got the fake mainstream media trying to cover for them, to cover it all up so nobody actually notices what they're doing. Well, you can only cover.
That's not going to work anymore.
Yeah, people are waking up. It doesn't matter. But all of that had to happen in order for the American people to get the sleep out of their eyes, take the blinders off their faces, and go, oh my God, look what's going on. Yeah. We have to do something to save our country.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, listeners of mine, I always love it when you come on here, and we're absolutely want to see these comments. Gypsy had a question. Oh, hang on, hit the wrong one. There we go. Going back to Trump's trial, do you think he's going to be in jail over contempt? Is her question to you.
I hope so.
I was saying this the other night. Go ahead.
You don't want to know why?
Okay,
because if they put President Trump in jail because they have violated his First Amendment, what do you think that's going to do to all the sleepy Americans out there who are just now waking up? And if they, and here's the really great thing. If they jail President Trump, they have guaranteed his win in November. Yeah. They may as well just put him in the White House right now. Just shuffle Joe off to the old folks' home, throw a diaper on his ass, and get him the hell out of here.
Don't hold back, Dr. McCutcheon. Tell us what you really think.
Don't think you want me to do that. I would be throwing a lot more four-letter words in there. But
you can say whatever you want here. You know that.
But on the other hand, if Judge Merchan dances right up to the edge and then doesn't do it, how much credibility will he lose?
Tons. Absolutely tons.
And in that moment, he will have lost his case.
Yeah.
He will have lost. The deep state will have lost again. And Trump will just,
next
show his beautiful blue eyes all over the place and give us rallies in Madison Square Garden and Harlem and the Bronx.
Stadium. Yep. Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, she does follow up with this question. If he is put in jail, are you worried about an Epsteining?
No.
Okay.
All right. There's two paths, right?
Okay.
Let's say they put Trump in jail and he gets Epsteined. Now what? They've made him a martyr.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yep.
Holy shit.
Mm-hmm.
You really want to do that? You want to? I mean, right now he's teetering on martyr status.
Yeah.
But you want to make him a martyr? Oh, that's really stupid. Do that.
Well, I don't disagree with you. Don't
But on
disagree
the
at
other
all.
hand, they put him in jail. Secret Service is going to empty the entire place.
Yeah. Yeah, and
So
then the New York State Police Department's going to look at the judge and go, "Thanks a lot. We spent all this time rounding these guys up, prosecuting them, getting them put in jail, and now the Secret Service is throwing them out because you put one man in jail. And now he's got the whole jail to himself, and we got more criminals on the streets. Thanks a lot, Judge Marchand."
Yep. And what will that do? You always have to follow through with what are the ripple effects going to be, and you have to imagine as many different parts of the story, how many different narratives can happen out of one little action. I mean, wouldn't it be cool if there was, I don't know, some kind of computer program that you could put in one little tidbit? Trump gets put into jail and it spits out all the different
Theoretical
decision
possibilities.
tree outcomes and possibilities that would happen. That would be like game theory.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, which means because you can do this, we have the computer power to do this. I bet you anything Trump's got on his team somebody who knows exactly all the different outcomes for all the different actions that any Judge Merchan can throw at him. I mean, didn't Merchan march Trump right up to the edge of not going to let Trump go to his son Barron's graduation? And then just the other day, it was like, well, okay, fine, go ahead. Well, how much pushback was he getting? How much pushback were the Democrats in New York State getting? I mean, we don't know.
Yep.
I'm sure Trump sat back and went, deny it. I dare you.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to eat your lunch.
Yeah, because I have a feeling, and I cannot prove this, obviously, but I've got a feeling that somewhere in the back of that man's brain, he's like, okay, go ahead and put me in jail. Go ahead and do it. Put me in the cell for 24 hours.
I could use a break.
Happens. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
You know,
I could get a nap.
I have a crowd of people outside the window chanting USA, USA. You know, we want Trump. Go ahead, Judge Marchand, do it. Not that I want it to happen to Donald Trump, but if this judge is silly enough to do it, he gets what he gets.
That's right. Well, again, all of the actions that we've been seeing since January 2021 and even before around President Trump, there are very deliberate actions happening around him that at every turn have been waking people out of their dead, brainwashed, propagandized sleep. Because we have been programmed, Brian. We have been programmed for decades. Why do you think they call it TV programming?
Good point.
When I was a little girl, my mom and dad, when they finished their master's degree, they splurged and they bought a TV. It was our first TV. It was an RCA color TV. It was great. I loved the TV. I'd plop my happy ass down in front of it for hours. And it wasn't too long before my mother would come in and roust me and my sister off the floor. And she'd say, you're being programmed. You need to go outside and play. I've never forgot that because I was like, programmed? What are you talking about? She said, you're being brainwashed. Get outside.
Yep.
We've been brainwashed for decades, and it's our TV that's doing it. It's the mainstream media. The reason that President Trump told his audiences at his rallies that the mainstream media was fake news is because President Barack Obama signed into law in 2013 the modernization of the Smith-Mundt Act. Now, the Smith-Mundt Act was from 1946-47, where Congress decided that their media had to tell the truth. Why? Because the German media during World War II and preceding World War II were brainwashing and propagandizing everyone in the country. And our Congress decided we're not going to let that happen. We have to have a media that tells the truth. We have to have that fourth estate that will speak truth to power. And so they wrote the Smith-Mundt Act to put into order that any media, radio, TV, papers, had to tell the truth. And in 2013, Barack Obama reversed that, which basically told any media outlet, just lie, propagandized. Here, I'll give you the 4 a.m. talking points. You remember Rush Limbaugh would say they got the
Yeah.
4 a.m. That was it. The media has been the propagandizing arm of the uniparty for decades.
Well, in that vein, I have a question from the audience, and Dr. McCutcheon, if I ever could introduce two people to each other that really ought to have some conversations, let me introduce you to this young man. If you're not familiar with him, Christian Watson. He has his own YouTube channel as well, and I have a feeling you two would have a load of fun together.
We'd have a great time.
Yeah. Do you believe that YouTube and new media, social media, whatever, has a destabilizing effect on propaganda?
Yeah. Yes. And remember what happened around January 6th? Twitter, YouTube, through people who were alternative media proponents, they threw them off the channel, right?
Yeah.
Did you get thrown off Twitter? I know a lot of people who did.
No, I'm not a big enough fish to get someone's attention yet.
Right.
So.
It was the big fish that got it. And and YouTube, I will warn you right now. I've been on Dr. Dave Janda's radio show a lot, and he is still getting YouTube censorship, where they throw whatever it is that Dr. Janda and I are talking about, they throw it out saying we violated terms of service. Right. Not recent stuff, but going back years. So, you tell me, just speak my mind, except, if YouTube throws you off, my apologies. But I guess that's street cred these days.
Well, the way I look at it is this. I mean, am I trying to grow my channel to the best it can be? Sure.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, I should have said channels.
Good.
I've got Rumble. We're on Rumble right now along with YouTube. And literally YouTube did this to me one night. I was live streaming. It was a Saturday night, and I was live streaming clips from the Tucker Carlson Vladimir Putin interview. Not playing the whole thing, just parts of it. And all of a sudden, people were telling me, "Hey, you got thrown off of YouTube." I'm like, "What?" This happened like 2 or 3 times during the stream. So finally, I'm just like, "Okay, screw it. We're cutting out of YouTube in 3, 2, 1," and we just went Rumble the whole rest of the night. Yeah. And I'm sitting there going, all I'm doing is playing the clip, letting people hear what Putin's saying, and I'm just commenting on it. That's all I'm doing.
But that's still too much truth. It's still too much truth.
Yeah.
So Christian asked about YouTube. I don't know.
You can be on YouTube, Rumble, Odysee, BitChute.
Right. But I think what he's saying is the alternative media. Well, what happened when YouTube and Twitter threw everybody off right around, it was that lead up into January 6th. So I know people who got thrown off in October, November, December, leading up to January 2021. But what that did was it forced all of those people who had been counting on YouTube to go find other places. Odysee, Rumble, BitChute, all of those sprang up out of those actions. So well done, YouTube. You really screwed yourself, because now you've got lots of competition, whereas before you were it. Yeah. So keep going there, bud.
No, exactly.
So yeah, the alternative media is going to help deprogram and depropagandize. As people begin to wake up, they're looking around saying, well, I can't trust the mainstream media. Obviously, they're lying to me. I know they're lying to me, because just look at the inflation numbers. So they're going to start going out and looking for other places. I noticed, I don't know if you did, but I noticed that when I was on with you in December, you didn't have as many followers on your Rumble channel as you do now.
True. That's very true. Rumble, I mean, the last time I looked, I had like almost 190 subscribers, or a little over maybe now, 190 on Rumble. I'm like bouncing right around 900 on YouTube, and it's been bouncing for about 3 weeks, but that's sort of my own fault because for various reasons I'm doing more live streams than I am just regular videos and posting them. But yeah, Rumble's just kicking right up and picking right along, and I'm like,
Yeah.
and I'm sitting there going, holy cow. I mean, I
Right.
have no doubt, and this is no offense to my YouTube audience because I love every last one of you, but it would not surprise me when I go back and look at the stats on this live stream on both channels, on both platforms. It would not surprise me at all to find out that Rumble actually performs better than does YouTube as
Yeah.
far as views and comments, etc.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite podcasters to watch is Salty Cracker.
Oh, I love crack. Yeah, I love salt.
If any of your audience watches him, you'll understand the affinity that I have with him. But one of his strategies, once YouTube started jerking him around, was he would stream on Odysee and YouTube simultaneously, and halfway through his stream, he would shut off YouTube and tell his YouTube audience, hey, we're headed to Odysee. Now he says we're headed to Rumble. And it was a middle finger to Susan Wojcicki, which, you know.
Yep.
So YouTube has screwed themselves, but in the meantime, they've also made it a necessity for podcasters and truthers and the independent media to go find other places that will accommodate them.
Absolutely.
And so I see this as a good thing, because the more we have a decentralized megaphone for information and truth, the less somebody can come in and take it over. I mean, I just read 4 or 5 weeks ago that George Soros was buying
AM radio stations.
It was like a couple hundred AM radio stations all across the country. And if there's a radio station that's hard up, yeah, they probably will sell to him.
Yep.
But that is centralizing its monopoly power. It's centralizing the information, which means, you know, you get your 4 a.m. talking points again.
Yep.
And the thing that has made America one of the greatest countries on earth has been our ability to have a decentralized everything.
Yep.
And we will be going back to that. We'll be going back to that on our money, because the Federal Reserve will be demolished. We'll be going back to that in fact, we'll have that idea that Thomas Jefferson said, where he said, we really want the focus of power in the towns and not so much at the states and very little at the federal government. We're headed in that direction if we can get enough Americans to wake up and look around and then be terrified of what they see happening, so that they can make a decision what will be best for their family and for our country in November. Yep. I mean, I know what my decision is going to be, but I didn't need 4 years of Biden to figure it out.
Exactly. I want to run one last question past you from the audience, and then one from myself, and I'm going to give you a free reign on this one. Step away for just 1 second. Let me find it. Yeah, here it is. What do you think China is going to do to remedy their economy? Will they try to push war in Taiwan, or I'll leave you to answer that one. So I'm going to give you some free reign and step off for just 1 second.
I don't think that China is going to turn to war to remedy its economy. I think China is going to back their currency with gold, and that will do a massive amount of stabilization. China also, just like Russia, China also has been encouraging its citizens to buy gold and silver. And what that does is it decentralizes the gold and silver holdings so that every person has their own gold and silver, their own money supply. And what that's going to do is it's going to stabilize China's economy And then China's economy is just going to grow like you've never seen it grow before. Well, I mean, they're already growing at something like 4 or 5%, but from where they were at in 2004 and 2005 at 12 and 15% growth, a 4 and 5% growth would seem kind of slow. But yeah, I don't see China going to war. They might have some negotiations with Taiwan. I know that there are people in the Chinese government that look upon Taiwan as still part of China. But you have to note that for years and years, the United States government supported a separate Taiwan from China, a Republic of China. I think is what they were calling Taiwan. But didn't Biden just recently say we don't support a separate Taiwan from China? So he reversed like 50 years of government policy with, I don't know, a slip of the tongue and a full diaper. Maybe, I don't know. But what I've been hearing is that China has been encouraging their citizens to buy gold, and what that will do is it will remove all the power of a monopoly central government. I think what we're going to be seeing in China is that Xi Jinping removing the Chinese Communist Party and returning China, or turning China, if I could say it that way, to something that is more along the lines of a republic. I think that's what we're going to see. And I think we're already seeing that happen in Russia. I'm not so sure what's going on in Brazil. India's thrown off their colonialism a long time ago, and they figured out that the centralized colonial government in manufacturing was a really bad deal. So, so one by one, the big countries are turning towards a republican form, a decentralized form of economy, because that really is the strongest.
Yeah.
Did that answer up in Connecticut's question?
We'll find out here in just a second. And while she's answering that, she threw something to me last night on Twitter, and I got to get your take on this.
Okay.
And I'm sure you no doubt heard about it. Republic First Bank collapses in first bank failure 2024.
Mm-hmm.
And then up in Connecticut threw me. It was either up in Connecticut or Gypsy, one of the two. Two of my, don't get me wrong, I love all my audience, but those two ladies are throwing me stuff all the time. From CNBC, why hundreds of U.S. banks may be at risk of failure. I mean, we were talking about this the last time you were here, and I'll just ask you: is the situation any better, or are we like on the verge of some serious in the days of 29 ahead?
Well, remember that $12 trillion I was telling you about? $12 trillion in bonds.
Mm-hmm.
See, the thing about bonds is the interest rate on bonds goes up when the price goes down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The price goes up, the interest rate goes down. So coming out of 2009, the interest rate on bonds was really small, so the price was high. And banks bought the bonds. Wait a minute. Banks bought the bonds because they had a lot of value. Right. And the banks backed their assets that they were holding in the bank with the bonds.
Right.
Okay. So now the interest rates start moving up.
Mm-hmm.
So now the interest rates are big, and those prices of bonds have fallen, which means that the bonds are not as valuable as what the banks originally had on their balance sheets, which means it's like when you're underwater on your mortgage, you owe the bank more than the house is worth out on the market.
Yep.
That's what's going on here. The banks are underwater on their bonds. And so are all the banks underwater on their bonds? Pretty good chunk of them are.
Yeah.
I mean, you got the 12 biggest banks in the United States are really underwater on their bonds. Like, JP Morgan Chase, City National. so forth. Wells Fargo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So here's part of the problem. If the bank is underwater on its bonds, which means that it doesn't have the value of the bonds to back up the assets, it means that the bank probably can't loan as much money because it doesn't have the asset base to cover the loans.
If the loans start going belly up.
The loans start going belly up. If we have a situation that we had in 2008 where, the mortgage-backed securities, the ones that were supposed to be all safe and A+ according to Moody's and S&Ps. Yeah. Yep. I mean, we're rolling that direction. The problem is that when a bank is taken over by the FDIC only pays depositors up to $250,000, I think, or $500,000 right. If it's a couple, if it's married. FDIC doesn't have the trillions of dollars in its pocket to pay all the. In fact, the numbers that I had my students running last semester in the fall was that the FDIC could afford to bail out 1.6% of all depositors. Jeez. Regardless of how much money the depositor had, up to $250,000. So if it's you and me in the room, I'm getting it.
Yeah.
If it's you and me and a third person in the room, you and me are getting it, and they're SOL. That's kind of how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and here's another thing. Thanks to a couple of senators by the name of Frank and Dodd, we got the Dodd-Frank bill in 2009.
The bane to the financial industry.
I call it the Franken-Dodd bill because it really is a horror, because it gave permission to banks that if they're underwater on their bonds, they don't have enough assets, why they could just go in and take your deposit. Because when you open your account, you are literally giving them your money. You are a creditor to the bank. And so if the bank finds itself underwater on money, it can just go take all the deposits. There we go. We're all set. Now, how many times do you think a bank can run that scenario? If JP Morgan Chase goes in and steals the money of all of its depositors, what do you think every American Joe Lunchbucket is going to do? The very next morning, they're going to be at their bank going, give me my money.
And the banks won't have it because
won't have it because they don't have enough cash. And we'll have a situation like what's going on in England right now, or in Australia, where the cashier sits there and says, okay, so you want $1,000. You want to clean out your account. What are you going to use the money for? Well, it's none of your fucking business.
None of your bloody business.
None of your business. Oh no, I've got to write it down. I saw a Twitter where one guy went from bank to bank to bank to bank, removing his money. And the reasons he was giving each and every teller, one was, well, I'm going to have a sex change operation. It was the most outrageous. I had almost.
That's great.
My God, I nearly lost it. I was laughing so hard. But in our banking system, the Franken-Dodd Act, the Dodd-Frank Act of 2009, says that banks can just take your deposits. Now, I don't think the same thing can be said for credit unions.
No, because they're not under FDIC.
Because they're not. Well, some of them are under FDIC, but it's a little bit twisty.
Yeah, it is.
But still, if my credit union takes my deposits and says, thanks so much, we were underwater on our bonds, all they have to do is take one person's, and that information is going to go flying through the Twitter sphere. And that bank will find itself without funds.
Yeah.
And then you have a 1929, bank holiday from 1933 situation.
Or your more recent example, I remember when Greece had that bank run in like the early 2000s.
Right.
Same thing's going to happen.
Yeah. The Greece thing, that happened twice to them because it happened again in 2008. It was like they didn't learn their lesson the first time. Now, Russians have not trusted. I've got a friend who's from Russia. She told me, she said, nobody in Russia, this was back in my PhD days. It's probably not true now, but back then she said nobody trusts Russian banks because the Russian government comes in periodically and takes all the money. Yep. Well, why on earth would you put your money in a bank if the government's going to come take it or if the bank's going to take it? So
you're not going to.
You ain't going to do it. Nope. Again, we go back to the reason that a decentralized money system is superior to a centralized federal bank like the Federal Reserve System is because everyone's got their own money. If you want to put it in a bank, put it in the vault, you can. But that was what the Second Amendment was for, partially as well.
Exactly.
Protecting your property.
Yep. And that's something that modern day politicians don't seem to understand. The American people intuitively, in their common sense, get it. The government's like, well, you don't need all these guns.
Oh, yes, we do.
Yeah, yes, yeah, we kind of do. 200 years of American history have taught us, if nothing else, that
not you much guys has changed.
Yeah, and one of my favorite quotes in life is by the late P.J. O'Rourke. Giving money and power to government is like giving whiskey and car keys to teenage boys.
Right. Yeah.
It's a recipe for disaster.
And that's what we're seeing right now. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what we're seeing right now. We've given them all the whiskey and the car keys, and then we're shocked and surprised when they drive the car off the cliff.
Yeah. Yeah. They're pulling a Thelma and Louise, and we're all sitting here going, well, can I take care of me and my family before the disaster hits? And that's,
right.
I mean, you and I discussed this the last time, and, and I'm sure if you want to add on to that advice, what can people do to prepare for what's coming?
Well, I think last time I said, buy gold, buy silver. Silver's cheaper. And silver, I think if you looked, is somewhere right around $26 an ounce ish. It was,
I believe you're right.
Yeah. I would say if you have a means of protecting yourself, buy more. I would say make sure you know who your neighbors are. That's one of the things I love about West Virginia is people are very friendly. But you gotta know who your neighbors are. $26.92. So it came up a little bit. Eventually it's going to break the $30 mark, and then it's going to be no holds barred till it stops running up. People are getting a little wise to what's going on. In fact, I was reading a month or so ago that is it Sam's Club that's selling something like $200 million a month in little gold bars. And then I found out from Dave Janda that they're also selling silver eagles. So they're selling both gold and silver. I think it's Sam's Club. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's ordinary folk like us that are going and buying it. And that's really kind of interesting, because what that means is through Sam's Club, okay, fine, you have to have a membership, but there's lots and lots of people who are figuring out that their Federal Reserve note isn't worth dick.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, to protect the value of your time, which is the money that you earn, buy gold and silver. You gotta have some way of protecting yourself. You probably need to put up some food. My great grandmother would spend all summer with this 3-acre garden. Her kids, my grandparents' generation, she had 11 children. She had 13 and 9 made it to adulthood. She had them all working in the garden. Mm-hmm. And she hired people to work in the garden. She spent all summer putting up tomatoes and all kinds of fruits and vegetables. And she would make cookies in the summer that they would not eat until Christmas. She spent the entire summer and fall harvest getting ready for winter, because there wasn't a Kroger's down on Fifth Avenue.
Yeah.
In 1880. There just wasn't. If
No.
she didn't put it up during the summer, it didn't get ate during the winter.
Yep.
Everybody knew how to hunt because that was how they put meat on the table. She had cows and chickens and goats.
Yep.
Pioneer. And those ways of preserving foods, if you don't know how to do it, go out and buy you some canned goods. You don't have to do a lot, just do a little every single time.
Exactly.
You don't have to do a lot. I wrote an article for one of the papers, I think maybe 18 months ago. It's on my my website, linksync.com. That's lync-sync.com. And up at the top are all the links that you can go to. My radio interviews are there. And there's an article, article I wrote for a local paper where I was talking about not just buying gold and silver and, protecting, but if you're getting to the point where shelter is getting expensive, you might consider multi-generational living. Now, on my street, there are several families where it's the great-grandparents, the grandparents, the kids, and the great-grandkids, 4 generations. Sometimes it's 3 generations. But that was a way that Americans used to build generational wealth, because the parents bought the land and then they raised their kids, and then the kids lived with the parents, and then the grandkids lived with the parents, and then the great-grandkids. And so by the time the original couple had passed on, all of that property was paid off. Nobody has to buy it again. It was like having a cast iron fry pan. I gave my cast iron fry pan to my daughter, who still uses it. That's a cast iron fry pan she doesn't have to spend money on, because that's already, it's an asset. Does that make sense?
It do indeed. And I am dropping your social media contact in both YouTube and Rumble
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's in the description of the video. So yeah, for people who want to check out, Dr. McCutcheon's work, not just here, but in various other places, feel free, follow her links, because it's an absolute joy having you on here, because it's fun to get people together who are willing to look at each other and go, do you get the feeling that, we're not being told the truth? And the other person says, I've been thinking the exact same thing. What do you think? I mean, I've said this to various people. We are reaching, there's a lot of things about the age in which we find ourselves, but I've got a working theory that, and I think I discussed this with you the last time we were here, and that is, there is a intellectual space that various people from various paths are walking to it, and it's a very interesting eclectic group. From the economic and political side, you got people like the Peter Navarros and the Dave Bratts and the Steve Bannons and the Jack Posobics and others. They're coming to it. From nerd space, you got people like, the Critical Drinker, Nerdrotic, Geeks and Gamers, they're coming to it. From the free speech side, you got stand-up comedians like Chrissy Mayer and Gino Biscotti and Anthony Cumia. They're coming to it. From the walkaway movement, people like Brandon Straka and Carrie Smith, Mike Harlow, and others, and they're all getting to this space, and they're looking at each other going, I know why I'm here, but what are you doing here? And everybody's realizing, the more they're talking to each other, hey man, we agree on a whole lot more than we ever disagreed on. Why didn't we do this sooner? And then they're figuring out even further, we were being kept apart.
Yeah.
And now it's like you said, the Great Awakening is happening. Not necessarily a spiritual revival. I use the term Great Awakening in that, or maybe it's the better phrase, the Great Eye-Opening. That's what's happening, is the Great Eye-Opening, where people are opening their eyes and realizing, holy crap, my government is screwing me over 7 ways from Sunday. And it's what do I do? Yeah.
I was telling a friend of mine, I don't know if you know her, Dr. Lori McCoy. She has advanced primary care. She's a direct primary care physician. She has a satellite office on 3rd Avenue in Huntington, like 3rd and 12th, I think. 3rd Avenue, 12th Street. And and I recognized this a long time ago, that I said to her, I said, we are living in the time of revelations. And she kind of looked at me, and I said, this is the big reveal.
Yeah.
This is where all of the layers of the onion are going to be stripped away until all you've got is that thin little piece in the middle, where all of the secrets that the deep state has been trying to hide from us for years by keeping us at each other's throats, hating each other, they're finally losing. Because as we come together, as you've noticed, we've got all these different people from all these different backgrounds, and we're meeting in the middle. We're going, yeah, we actually kind of do agree on quite a bit. And the things that we don't agree on really don't matter that much.
Yeah, it's not that big of a deal.
It's not that big of a deal. And the thing that the deep state fears the most is not that we are awakened. It's that we will come together and turn around and look at them and go, y'all are in deep shit. You better run. Yeah. And but I'm telling you, unless you can get off planet, there is no place to hide. And that's the point we're getting to, where the people who have been actively trying to harm us, and we talked about the Jabberwocky thingies last time.
Mm-hmm.
The people who are actively trying to harm us, they're actively trying to harm our country. They're doing their damnedest to harm the economy. All those people, no matter where they're at in the pyramid, whether they're up at the top or down at the bottom as paid agitators and rioters, y'all better run, because we see you now.
Absolutely.
And you're in big, deep shit.
Absolutely. Well, folks, it is always a pleasure to have Dr. Robin McCutcheon on. And, I said this before, I'll say it again. Anytime you got something burning on the brain and you want someplace to go talk about, you give me a shout and let me know. And I'll say, okay, when do you want to do it? You're on. Let's just go.
Okay. Well, thank you.
No, so for folks who maybe they're watching this tonight and they're not familiar with you, I know we dropped the link to your social media in chat, but where else can people find you? Where can they follow you? How can they best support you?
It's a funny thing. I do have a LinkedIn page, but I can't remember the last time I went there. I'm just not a LinkedIn person. I'm not really a social media person. The website that you put up there was built for me by my husband, and he maintains it. I've got all the links at the top. You can see the radio interviews, and that's got radio and podcast and newspaper articles that I've written. Most of that is free. I think the only thing behind a paywall would be Dave Janda's Insider Insight. But he does put a few of them up on Rumble. I've got my In the Classroom, which are my economics lectures for my principles of economics. I've got my Freedom Lectures, which are my lectures for my Atlas Shrugged class. And what else do I have up there? I think that's it. I've got radio, In the Classroom, and Freedom Lectures. Mm-hmm. And all of that is free for people to use. It's part of our gift to humanity. We used to run a conference for free markets and capitalism. And let me tell you, that was pretty challenging during the Obama years.
Oh, I'll bet.
Yeah. But we set up that website so that we could have our conference. But it's turned into a really nice library and repository of all the different variety of podcasts and such that I've been doing over the last 6 years or so. So your people should go there. If they want to get a hold of me, you can find me at Marshall. I'm not hiding. Well, not much. Just type in my last name, McCutcheon, and I think I'm the only McCutcheon on campus these days. So you can find me there.
Well, I want to put these comments up here and let you see them, because our audience is very appreciative whenever you come on, and definitely I always like letting our guests see when, I feel like I've had 2 semesters of college tonight. You're very welcome,
Thank
Gypsy.
you,
But
Gypsy.
she was doing all the educating. I'm just giving her the microphone. So it's like, there are moments as a host you just step back and go, "Olay, have at it." So it's like, there you go. Well, thank you again, Dr. McCutcheon, for being here. It's always a pleasure to have you. Folks, we will be back this weekend with Front Porch Brunch. I'm not sure what day we're doing it yet. I'll let you know probably tomorrow. So,
Wait
Dr.
a minute.
McCutcheon. Yep, sorry.
So you're going to be on Saturday, May the 4th?
It's either going to be Saturday or Sunday. There's a yard sale that has the potential to affect my schedule. So,
well, Saturday is Derby Day.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
And may the 4th be with you.
Yes, and may you stay away from the Revenge of the 5th. So there you go. All right, hang around for a second. We'll say some proper goodbyes. Folks, thank you so much for being here tonight. We love you, and stay safe out there. Good night.